What is up, maniacs? I am Zach, and I am the Milly Maker Maniac. Welcome to our combination episode this week. We are combining our game-by-game breakdown and our player pool video into one with the holiday mixed in there this week in Thanksgiving. We are a little bit out of our normal schedule. So we're going to look at our spreadsheet on the game-by-game. We won't go as in-depth as we normally do on the game-by-game, but we'll kind of just do an overview, and I'll point out where some big advantages are, where I think the grades aren't showing the current climate, and then we'll jump into the player pool from there. So let's go ahead and jump into it. We've got 9 games on the main slate this week. We'll start with the Rams and the Carolina game. Actually, let's just go through and we'll look at the best opportunity for a back and forth game, for a game environment to really go off. For the most part, it's evenly matched teams this week. There's not a game that jumps out like this is going to be a huge shootout. Like our big defenses that we attack each week have all played in the Cowboys and the Bengals. I guess we do have the Jets on this slate, but they play Atlanta, led by Kirk Cousins this week. So I think there's some potential there for that game to go off a little bit. But the total on this game is 40 points. Like, you don't really think it's going to be back and forth. If it is back and forth, you'd expect it to be kind of a Breece Hall game on the Jets side, or maybe you could see some random big plays, or maybe like an Adonai Mitchell. John Mechie's been good in the last couple weeks. So there's a little bit of hope on the Jets side. On the Atlanta side, without London, Mooney and Pitts are somewhat viable, but really it's coming down to, does that run game for Atlanta get it going? Does Bijan have a big game? If he has a massive game, you can see this game having a little bit, hitting the over for sure. But we generally don't want to target 39.5-point games. But that being said, we do want to target the Jets defense. So I think Bijan is really the play that comes out of this. I don't necessarily think this is one that we would game stack. Tampa Bay, Arizona is somewhat interesting. Tampa Bay has the advantage across the board, but you got Baker playing with an AC joint sprain. It sounds like he is going to play. It looks like Bucky's going to come back, but we don't know what that's going to look like. Are they going to try to ease him back, or are they going to lean on him to try to, get a big win here? This is one of our higher totals on the slate. It's a low total slate. It's a pretty ugly slate. All the best QBs for the most part besides Stafford and some of the best offenses all played on Thanksgiving. So we have kind of a unique low scoring slate here as far as the lines. So yeah, this Cleveland-San Francisco game is somewhat intriguing to me. From a grading standpoint, there's nothing here that says that it should be a good game. San Francisco's defense is really bad. I think Shedeur Sanders is pretty good. The question is does Stefanski want to give him the opportunity to have success against this San Francisco team, or does he kind of do what he did last week, where he's not outright sabotaging him, but he's also making sure that when they're in the red zone, he's not getting to play and they're running out of Wildcat and things along those lines, where I think Stefanski has to become a believer. I think Shedeur is kind of saying the appropriate things. A lot of the clips that you're seeing on social media come off as brash and cocky, but if you listen to those whole interviews, he's saying all the right things. He just believes in himself and he vocalizes that, but it's not like he's not talking about putting in the work and having an understanding of this is his one opportunity and he's got to capture it. He seems to be real supportive of Stefanski. So if he can win over Stefanski and Stefanski starts to lean into if I can help this kid be good, maybe I save my job. I think there's some potential there for him to have a big day. It also very much could be a Judkins day against a San Francisco D that's very beat up. And then, obviously, San Francisco has the capability of putting up points, even though they're playing this Cleveland defense. This game does look like there's going to be some weather, which points it more in the direction of being low scoring. But I could see an outcome where this game goes off. And if it does go off, this one is more of a one that you can have a game stack too. It's not just one or two players. You can play both quarterbacks and stack them with pass catchers. McCaffrey's pretty expensive this week. Probably won't get there at all in this matchup. But if you're playing game stacks of this, obviously you would want to incorporate McCaffrey into that. This New Orleans-Miami game is actually one of my favorites. The overall score is a 5 and a 4 for each. pretty good advantage for Shuck and the passing game for New Orleans here. And then you got Devin Neal only at 5K. Not a matchup advantage by any means, but not like a really bad matchup either. It's kind of slightly bad to neutral against Miami. But then you got Miami. Passing game that has a slight advantage. We can build some Tua lineups, but really Achane and Waddle, I think, just need to be core plays. That's where you know the ball is going to go. It's really, you don't have to go outside of that. So we can game stack this. If I was going to game stack this, I would prefer to go from the Shuck side and go with Olave. Looks like he's going to play. Looks like he had some back spasms throughout the week. Practiced in limited fashion yesterday, so it does look like he'll be good to go. We can also mix in Tipton at 3K as a nice pump play out of this game. So Juwan Johnson obviously is a piece that we want to incorporate as well. So this game I could see hitting the over, and I definitely could see New Orleans hitting the over. That would be a prop that I would be most interested in, actually, is going directly at that New Orleans prop. Tampa Bay, Arizona, we talked about a little bit, but you could see this game going off. You could see Baker having that random big game. Arizona, it's looking like Trey Benson's going to be out again. Let me double check that. But really, you were not looking at this passing game or this running game anyways. We're going to be attacking. Oh, he has been ruled out. DeMarcado's out. Bam's banged up. So, let's see what we know about Bam here. Limited all week, so you expect him to play. But really, I don't want to go after running back there. Here, it's more about the pass catchers. And it looks like Harrison probably will play. If he plays, I'd be interested in him at 6K. If he doesn't, I would be interested in Wilson at 5,900. And Dortch is solid at 4,600. McBride's too expensive now at 7,800. I probably won't get there except for my Brissett stacks. And Brissett's finally priced up. So Arizona isn't nearly as attractive as they have been in previous weeks. But this game is one that could be one of the higher scoring ones on the slate for sure. This Jacksonville and Tennessee game I actually like quite a bit. The grades do not show anything positive for Tennessee, but Ward has been playing better in recent weeks. The stack is with DK. And Jacksonville has been doing solid from a fantasy standpoint. You can see this game going off a little bit. I like ETN in this game. Brian Thomas is coming back. He's kind of a sneaky tournament play, I think. Has a potential. I think part of why he struggled this year is just because he hasn't been healthy. So we'll see if he's healthy after finally getting his ankle right, and hopefully his wrist and shoulder as well, and see if he can kind of return to his 2024 form. I also really like Bryn Strange in this game. But the game that I really like that I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about is the Seattle and Minnesota game. This is in Seattle. Max Brosmer is going to start for Minnesota. He's the Stone Man at 4K. Now, obviously, we look at these grades, and this looks like a really bad spot for Minnesota and Max Brosmer. But a good chunk of this is, all of this is the grading of Carson Wentz and the grading of Jonathan James McCarthy. And he may or may not have a concussion, but he is in concussion protocol, and he is not playing this week. Brosmer is kind of one of those guys that I like. He's a pure passer, but he's a guy that was overlooked going into college, bounced around a little bit, but had success at every level, and then worked himself up to the D1 level, had success there at Minnesota. And when you watch these Minnesota games the last few weeks, like Kevin O'Connell is doing like his absolute best, and these wide receivers are wide ass open, both Jefferson and Addison. But McCarthy's just been missing them. And I think Brosmer has the profile to be able to just put the ball on these guys. Like, I think he's just going to be a much more accurate passer than McCarthy has been. I know that Seattle obviously isn't the most ideal matchup, but at 4,000, if he throws for 2 touchdowns, and if 2 of them go to one guy, or if he throws for 3 touchdowns and it goes to 2 and 1 or something like that, we can do single stacks or double stacks out of this game, and I think be pretty contrarian there. And I also think that they're going to be in chase mode. Like the Seattle advantage in the passing game is crazy. Like, just dominant. So we expect Darnold to have a big game. Obviously, we expect JSN to have a big game. But I think Minnesota is going to push back a lot more than what Vegas is showing right here with their 14.5 total. I think Brosmer is going to be able to run the offense at a higher level than either the quarterbacks have that have played this year. And I believe in KOC's play calling ability. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm coming at this game. I think it's a stretch, and it's definitely against what Vegas is saying and what the industry is saying. But you have two of the most talented, well, definitely one, but you have two very talented pass catchers, Justin Jefferson being one of the best receivers in the league, and Jordan Addison has had many big games throughout his career. You could definitely see a scenario in which they push back and this game goes back and forth, which to me makes this the most exciting game of the week. If that outcome, that obviously is low likelihood with where Vegas is putting this line at, but just based on previous quarterbacks that have played with KOC and what his profile is just being like an accurate passer that gets the ball out on time. That sounds like a really good combination with KOC and these pass catchers, even in a tough environment against Seattle. So I like that approach to it. We'll definitely have Brosmer as one of our core plays. And from what I was seeing, he should be around 2% owned, so it gives us a lot of leverage on the field if that is the case. And then these last two games are ones that kind of stick out to me as well. You got the Chargers with a big passing game advantage besides the pass blocking, but when Joe Alt's been out, that's been the case every single week. This is actually one of their better matchups in recent weeks as far as like how bad of a mismatch they have in the pass blocking versus pass rush. I really like my favorite people to stack with Herbert this week and will be like core plays for me are QJ and Aronde Gadsden, followed by McConkey, and then Keenan Allen would be the other pass catchers that I have the most interest in there. But the way that this game goes off, obviously we look at these grades and nothing good for the Raiders here, but they did just fire Chip Kelly. I think it's probably just the overall staff is pretty dysfunctional. I was hearing some reports that Chip Kelly was calling plays that hadn't been installed or was getting play calls in that weren't complete and things along those lines that were really creating a lot of issues. But to me, if the head coach is aware of those things, and I'm sure that the quarterback's got to be voicing frustrations with that in Geno, that this should have been addressed a lot earlier in the season. So the fact that it took this long for Chip Kelly to get fired or not even make an adjustment gives me some concerns about Pete Carroll at this point in his career. But all that being said, there is a world in which you get a new play caller in and we get a little boost for this offense. Against the Chargers defense that's been kind of up and down throughout the year, they've given up some big games. Let's go look at their game log. So, yeah, gave up 35 against Jacksonville. Then previous weeks held Pittsburgh to 10, Tennessee to 20, Minnesota to 10, but that was J.J. McCarthy's. Then we go back, gave up 38, gave up 27 to Washington, 21 to the Giants, which isn't too bad. But, yeah, so, I mean, they've had some weeks that have given up some big scores. Like, they've had a decent year, and they're definitely not like a slouch by any means, but they also aren't world beaters. So I can see a scenario in which Vegas pushes back a little bit more in here. I do have some interest in Geno to Trey Tucker, Geno to Brock Bowers, obviously, and then the other guy that I would mix in there actually would be Tyler Lockett. Since he's been traded, there's just a comfort level with him and Geno. So I do think that there's potential for them to bounce back and play a lot better than what these grades are showing. And then the last game here, our highest total on the slate, Pittsburgh and Buffalo. Obviously, massive playoff implications. You got Buffalo coming off of a tough loss last week. This is as we're getting into the later months of the year. Definitely can be more of Josh Allen hero mode. And this Buffalo defense hasn't been great either. You do have Aaron Rodgers playing with basically a broken wrist, but he is going to play. So this game could go a lot of different ways. I like Jaylen Warren a lot in this scenario. Solid advantage in the run game. If they can get the run game going, that sets up well for the rest of the offense to have success and run that play action, and also allows them to be in like their big 3 tight end sets, get Darnold, Washington involved. So I don't know. I feel like 47.5 to me, I would take the under on this actually. But there are scenarios in which you have 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks in a playoff type environment, which is it's a nearly a must win for both teams. Big game. So you can see this game getting pushed. You have 2 scores over here that really this is from my scoring standpoint on just the grades. This game shows like it's the most likely to be a shootout. We talked through some of the scenarios where, why I think the grades aren't necessarily reflecting the opportunity that's present right now or the changes that have occurred. These grades are always cumulative. So it doesn't necessarily show like the most recent data or changes of personnel, coaching, things along those lines. It gives us a good guideline, but it's not going to give us all the information we need. We got to fill in the pieces based on other information as well. But this one points to having the potential to be a higher scoring game than the rest of them, more of a back and forth affair. But there's not a game environment in this whole slate that jumps off as, wow, we got to be involved in this game. To me, the one that's most exciting is Seattle and Minnesota, despite it showing a real negative grade for Minnesota. I just got a good feeling about Max Brosmer and their pass catchers there. So let's go ahead and I'll just sort by best quarterback ranking of the week. As far as the grades go, you can see a lot of green over here in the pass catching area. For Sam Darnold, he will be my highest owned quarterback of the week for sure. Would like to see some more push from Minnesota to give him that potential of going off, but he's only 5,600, which allows us to combine him with JSN at 9,500 and still be able to build out a pretty balanced lineup with JSN in it because of how cheap Darnold is. So I like that quite a bit. Obviously, Matthew Stafford is playing at an MVP level. We also see that there's a pretty big advantage here in the run game for the Rams. I do think something that we have to be aware of is I very much think that Sean McVay wants to get the MVP for Matthew Stafford. Because of that, I anticipate in the red zone that they continue to pass the ball and try to get passing touchdowns. Obviously, their main focus is winning the game, but there's also the game within the game that McVay seems to have an awareness of more than other coaches. So I expect them to try to get Matthew Stafford to 40 touchdowns through the air this year. So even though this looks like a great spot for Kyren, I'm kind of leaning against him a little bit just because I believe that they're going to try to pass the ball more. The other problem, though, with the Rams, and I will definitely build some Stafford stacks, but he is priced up now at $7K. So to 4X his salary, he would need to get to 28, which he's done a few times this year for sure. 30, 29, 27, 26, 27. So, yeah, I mean, he can 4X it. 5Xing is, we don't have any games to 35, but it's expensive to stack with him, with Puka being at 9K and Devontae being at 7,500. So that's the reason why I'm not like all in on Matthew Stafford, just because pricing, like these guys have to hit, and they have to hit so hard to be in the Milly Maker lineup. I definitely will build some Matthew Stafford to Devontae, like some single stacks with Nakua and Devontae, and then double stacks with both of them together. But I probably won't have any more than, 6 or 7 Stafford lineups, just because because of pricing. Not because I don't think he's going to throw for 3 touchdowns, but I think there are going to be other quarterbacks on the slate that throw 3 touchdowns that are going to be a lot cheaper. And their pass catchers are going to be cheaper. Like Herbert, when we go back over to our sheet, you can see he is our next quarterback with a rating of 7 here. Everything's really solid besides the pass blocking. But with him, if you get him with his pass catchers, it leaves a lot more salary, right? So you get Herbert, and then we can come over here and we can get Ladd, QJ, Gadsden. Like all these guys are in a lot more of a middling range. It allows us to get to a lot more across this across our lineup. Like we can get in and we could get to like a Bijan and an Achane and still have some wiggle room to build out a lineup. Like we go down to Browns down here, 4,100 each. There's a good amount of punt plays this week too that I like. I like Jerry Jeudy this week. If we keep going down, I like Tyler Lockett, Tillman. Where's Mitchell at? I thought he was right around this range too. Yeah, Adonai Mitchell's in here. So we got some options that we can build out with Herbert, a lot more so than we do when we build out a Stafford lineup. And then the next big advantages are actually New Orleans. I do like Tyler Shuck a lot this week. We'll look at that when we get into the player pool. Or we'll jump over there now. Let's just do it. Look over here at New Orleans. Obviously, we can build super cheap stacks. We can go Shuck with Olave. Does look like he's going to play. And then Tipton actually is the one that I liked. Last week he had 4 targets and had a rushing attempt as well. And he's the min price. Bailey has I guess he did get 7 targets last week. I didn't realize he had 7. So that's in play too. And then Jawan Johnson would be the other main stack. So Olave and Jawan Johnson would be the main focus there for sure. This looks like a good matchup for Jawan as well against Miami. They've been really bad against the tight end. So I like Tyler Shuck. That allows us to get to a lot in our lineups. And then it starts to drop off. We've got decent matchup advantages, but I don't really want to be heavy on Kirk Cousins or Trevor Lawrence. I have a little bit more interest in CJ Stroud and Nico Collins. But, we'll see how Stroud comes in. Obviously, a big game they play. The Indianapolis Colts in a game that has massive playoff implications. So that one could definitely be a game that goes off as well. We didn't really talk about that game. Let's go ahead and sort this back to the game and look at that one real quick because we didn't talk about it. But it shows Houston having solid advantage kind of across the board and then decent advantage for Indy primarily in the run game. But it's just hard to get to Jonathan Taylor at his price this week. And it doesn't really look like a great Daniel Jones spot. He's been faltering in the previous few weeks. He also, reports are that he is playing with a broken fibula or a stress fracture in his fibula. They say it's not going to impact him, but that can't be comfortable by any means. So I'm not too excited about Daniel Jones against this really good Houston defense. I think this is going to be a really good game, like a good real life game. I have my doubts in it being a good fantasy football environment though this week, unless it's from the Houston side. I have more interest in the Houston side than I do on the Colts side this week. All right, let's go back to quickly sort for quarterbacks. Oops, we don't want those ones. Baker's down here. Baker, we'll definitely build some Baker lineups, but worried about him with the injury. It feels like his last year in Cleveland where he tried to play through injury and his performance went way down because of it. Similar vibes with that right now. So I'm not super high on Baker, but I definitely will not completely negate him out of my lineups just because he has the potential to go off any week. Do have interest in Tua. We'll build a few Tua lineups. Beyond that, there's not really something that jumps out here. Obviously, Josh Allen, somebody that we'll need to talk about. We'll jump into that in the player pool, but not a massive advantage by any means. Let's look at running back, what's showing for the best matchup advantage for running backs. We got the Kyron spot, but we talked about it where I think that most of the touchdowns are probably going to go through the air. And then you also have the element of the split that's been happening. Jaylen Warren is the one that makes the most sense. Well, they probably will lean on him in that game against Buffalo, and Buffalo's run D has been really bad. The Chargers, this one's somewhat skewed because a lot of this has actually been Justin Herbert. Like the grades, when we look at the run grade, does include quarterback runs, and Herbert has been running more this year. That's pulling that grade up, and they have a disadvantage on the offensive line just across the board. This O-line is bad with all the injuries that they've had, but still it is a decent advantage, just run game versus run D. A lot of that has to do with scheme and things along those lines that can make up for these blocking deficiencies that they have. So Vidal is definitely in play. We'll definitely consider him. It looks like a really good spot for Bucky to come back. Yeah, Tampa Bay's hard to figure out this week. Like, they could be the sneaky team that you have, but you have so many injury questions that it's hard to really lean into it as core plays. But I definitely want to build in some lineups where they go off just because they have that skill set, those talented players that can go off in any matchup, and the field's kind of off of them this week. So I want to be involved there for sure. Then it's a good spot, not a great spot, but a good spot for Jonathan Taylor. It's just at his price, it's not good enough for me to really go after him. But now we're starting to get to some spots that I do like and that are slight advantages, not massive, but pretty solid. I like Bijan this week. I like Woody Marks. Actually, one thing that I found was CJ Stroud throws the ball to running backs at a much higher rate than Davis Mills. If I remember correctly, it was 16% of his passes go to running backs in comparison to Davis Mills being at 6%. So that could help Woody Marks get even more fantasy points to the air as well, and what looks like a positive run game advantage at the moment too. Then we got James Cook. Definitely want him to be a core play. Breece Hall is going to be very chalky this week, which I find interesting. Like, it's a decent advantage, but he hasn't had many boom games this week or this year. I mean, and they're playing Atlanta, so he definitely is in our player pool, but I don't want to go too crazy on it. And then you have Cleveland at home against that really banged up and at this point bad San Francisco team. So Quinshon Judkins is definitely somebody that I'm going to be mixing in. And we also talked about with Shedeur, like last week, it was obvious that Stefanski was like didn't want to have Shedeur throw for like 3 touchdowns. He allowed him to move the ball a little bit. I think Shedeur kind of overcame really a bad game plan in a lot of ways, honestly. But what we did see is when they got to the red zone, they were not going to be passing the ball. They were just giving the ball to Quinshon Judkins, and they just took Shedeur off the field and went straight to the Wildcat. And that is definitely a high likelihood to happen again, and I think they'll be able to move the ball pretty effectively against his defense. So looks like a good spot for Judkins on the matchup side. All right, and then just overall offense, this kind of just, I like to see this just because, we can dive into whether a quarterback has a good spot or a running back has a good spot, or it's pass catchers or certain matchups. But at the end of the day, like, we want to target offenses that are going to score a lot of points, and we don't need to overthink it. We just want to spread it out across that offense. Who are guys we want to look for offenses that are going to have a lot of yards and score a lot of touchdowns, and we want to pick guys from those teams. That's really the oversimplification of what we're trying to do when we narrow down our player pool, is find those guys in those scenarios that have the highest likelihood of success. There's other ways to get there, obviously, in DFS. Like, you can have a team that doesn't move the ball really well, but all of the moving of the football that they do and all the scoring they do goes through one person. So that can be another way that we can get fantasy points. But the easiest way to get it is having an offense that has multiple weapons, that moves the ball effectively, and multiple people score points, but score fantasy points. This week, though, our best offenses from an overall standpoint, as well as this also includes like game environments. So Pittsburgh is getting a big boost here because they're at home in the highest scoring game of the slate. So that boosts them up quite a bit. But our best options this week are showing as the Rams, the Steelers, the Chargers, and Seattle. And then we have a little drop down to Tampa Bay and Buffalo. And then it's more like there's some advantages here, but these aren't like offenses that we want to go nuts on, with Atlanta, Jacksonville, Indy, Houston, New Orleans, and Jets down here as we continue down. But yeah, so the Rams are hard to target just because of their pricing, but obviously there will be fantasy points coming out of that game. It's just a matter of, are they spread out, or does one person pay off their price? Does somebody 4x or 5x their salary from this team? My lean is probably not, honestly. I think it's probably spread out, and they all have, a couple of them have solid games like Puka or Devontae or Stafford and Kyron. They all put up 20 spots, but that's not going to win you a tournament. If they get a 30 or 35, that can win you a tournament at their price point. But I think it's just going to be hard for them to pay off their price. Pittsburgh, though, Jaylen Warren is the one that jumps out as the guy most likely to pay off his price and come out of that game. The Chargers, their pass catchers and Vidal are all in play. It's a little bit harder to narrow down, so we'll kind of just spread that out more evenly. But again, QJ and Oronde Gadsden are the ones that jump out to me the most there. And then Seattle, it's simple. It's Darnold and it's JSN. We can mix in some AJ Barner. We can mix in some Rashid Shaheed. And we can even mix in a little Cooper Kupp into our Darnold stacks. But really, it's JSN and it's Darnold. That's the core that we're going after there. All right, let's jump over to our player pool. Talked through a good chunk of it already, so I won't bore you guys too much as we go through this, but I'll hit on things that we haven't hit on as we walk through this. So my core, like my main guy at quarterback this week is Sam Darnold. That price is just too attractive with such a great matchup advantage, and I do think that Minnesota can push them a lot more than what the market thinks. So I'm going to lean into that game. I'm going to lean into Sam Darnold, and I'm going to be much heavier than the field on him. Definitely could be a crash and burn spot, as I've had many of those in recent weeks, but it's a stand that I feel good about and I'm going to lean into. And as my hat says, I'm going to stay fucking positive. And one of these weeks, I'm going to have all my stands hit. I haven't had that happen since week 2, but we're going to keep chipping away. We're going to stay positive and optimistic. And to me, the play that jumps out to me the most this week is Sam Darnold, as well as the pass catchers for Minnesota in that game. I really like I obviously like JSN, but also like Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison out of that game. I just think there's a potential for a much higher scoring game than what the market thinks. And we also have the revenge narrative. You have Sam Darnold going in, playing the team that didn't want to bring him back in favor of Jonathan James McCarthy. That didn't pay off well for them. But it just feels like a great spot for Darnold to score 4 touchdowns, throw for 4 touchdowns. And I do think, like I said, that Minnesota can push back more to create an environment where he is playing the whole game. We've had a lot of Darnold's big games this year have been like big bursts in the first half, and it prevented him from really being like a tournament-winning player because he hasn't had to do anything in the second half. We've had a few games. We had one game a few weeks ago where he threw for just 12 attempts because they dominated Arizona so badly. Let's go look at his game log and we can reflect on that a little bit. So like, and this was a bad game, obviously, against the Rams. He became a pumpkin in that game. But outside of that, against Arizona, he only had 12 attempts. Like, you can't really blame him for that. They have 44 points in that game. And he just threw for 1 touchdown in that game. But can't blame him for 12 fantasy points. They were dominating on 12 attempts, 178 yards. Like, that is 83% completion percentage, 15 yards average. Yeah, so you can't hold that against them. That game environment didn't let him go off. But in this game, this one, again, shut him down a lot in really the second half because they came out big early. But in that game, he did get to 31. Houston's a tough matchup, so can't really hold that one against him. Jacksonville, solid 20 spot. But anytime he's had to throw for a decent amount, he's had those big scores. And a lot of these games, though, this game here, this was another blowout. This is another blowout down here. Like, they're not pushing in the second half. He's got that upside to get there. They just haven't had to push a lot yet. And at his price, it just seems like he's way underpriced, and you know who to stack him with. You can just put him with JSN. It also allows us to get to JSN at that 9,500 and not like wreck our lineups. Like when we put him in, we still have an average player remaining of 5K. We put our defense in there. We go down here to the Browns. We got 5,300 remaining, and then I like to punt a tight end this week. So I'll be a lot of Brenton Strange and a lot of Harold Fannin. Those are going to be my 2 guys down there. So now we've got a whole bunch of flexibility where we get 5,700 across the board. And what I really like is you can bring either Justin Jefferson in here as a bring back. We can bring back Addison down here, which gives us even more flexibility. Like if Addison's the one that goes off, then we can go up here and we can get a Bijan and Achane or something along those lines. That might be a little much. Maybe we go Bijan and Cook, so we're not paying up as much. And then we could do a little double stack here, and we could bring Shaheed in. Leaves us 2,800. Probably not enough there actually to double stack with Shaheed. But we could also, maybe we don't go as hard at running back. Maybe we come down here and we get Judkins at 6,200. That opens up a little bit more. Then we could go get Shaheed. Then that leaves us some flexibility in the flex where we can get somebody solid. A few different options in here. Ty Johnson, somebody we can consider. Josh Downs is in consideration as well. Juwan Johnson's definitely in play. I like Judy out of this group the most. I just think he's the most likely to get a big play and has that potential to get a 100-yard upside. Obviously, we haven't seen that at all this year, but we've seen it in the past, and he has a much different quarterback profile now. So, like, this is a lineup that I like here, and we're playing in that game in Minnesota quite a bit, but shows you like we can get JSN in here and still get some real quality pieces around him when we stack him with Darnold. So that is a big reason why I like Darnold so much this week. Let's get over here back to our core plays. But yeah, so I like Herbert. The matchup's good there. It's just harder to stack with him. Again, I like Darnold more, but in that price point, Herbert is the pay up option that I could see hitting the most. I really like this sub 5K range. There's quite a few guys, even in my main core plays, that I think could win tournaments this week. It's crazy to say, but this is like the best matchup Ward's had. Jacksonville on the road has been a much worse defense than they have been at home. Cam Ward's been showing more in recent weeks. You can stack him with DK, and then you can really do whatever you want in your lineup. So I like that a lot. Tyler Shuck we already looked at, but easy to stack with. Olave and Juwan Johnson. And then Shedeur, all of his pieces are crazy cheap. If Shedeur throws for 3 TDs, that stack is just going to, whatever, the stack with, you can go with Tillman, you can go with Judy, you can go with Fannin, you could even mix in Njoku in there. They're all under 4,500. So you can get multiple pieces into if you're double stacking Shedeur, you can basically, for 12K, have 3 of your squares filled in. And that's not even including your defense. So let's just go see what that looks like as far as what you're able to build with that. Obviously, the stack has to hit. And I will admit, I do believe quite a bit in Shedeur, actually. I think he is a good NFL quarterback and has the potential to have a long career, but he is in a tough situation where it feels like he is not Kevin Stefanski's guy. And last week in the play calling, I wouldn't necessarily call it sabotage, but there was an element of a lack of belief from Stefanski and not really being willing to take the training wheels off and playing a very conservative game plan. If Stefanski can come around to the fact that Shedeur has the ability to throw the ball down the field and that they can do a lot more with this offense, he definitely could have a 3-touchdown day. But that's a big if. We haven't seen anything that shows that Stefanski is really going to try to put Shedeur in a advantageous position. He should. I think we don't know what's going behind the scenes. I do think Shedeur is aware of what his circumstances are, realize that this is his shot. He's probably not going to get another one. And so far, so good. But I know that he's trying. My estimation is that he's probably trying to build that relation with Stefanski and be like, hey, man, let's do this. We can save each other's job. I can be your guy. And it's just a matter of whether or not Stefanski buys into that. But anyways, getting a little bit too much into my feelings on what's going on in Cleveland. But yeah, look at this. We can get Shedeur, Tillman in there, and then we still got 6,300 per, and that's without our defense. So if we get our defense in there, then we got 7K per. And then if we go Fannin instead, still the same thing. We can really build out whatever we want in this. We can pay up here. We can even get another running back in there. We could go JSN. And we could get back into that game if we wanted to, and we could bring back Addison. And I think we could actually add another Brown here if we wanted to. 3,900. We could bring in Tillman. I like Higgins a decent amount. I like Lockett a little bit too. So there's Strange is solid in this range. Yeah, I actually like probably Strange the most in this range. So gives us a lot of flexibility here if it hits. If Sanders throws 3 touchdowns and we have the appropriate stack, it just allows us to get to so much value on this slate that other stacks aren't going to allow us to get to. And I think that there is a chance he throws for 3 touchdowns. Like I would say, if I was to put a percentage on it, I would say, I don't know, 15%, somewhere in that ballpark of if we play this slate 100 times, that he throws for 3 touchdowns. Like this 49ers defense is not good. And yeah, so like this matchup is really good. If I had faith that Stefanski was just going to look at the matchup and like do what the matchup says to do and try to score as many points as possible rather than just not make mistakes, which is kind of how they're playing it, where the thought process is don't make mistakes and then this defense is going to hold the team in the game and then they have a shot at the end. But really, like this looks like an opportunity where they can score points and dominate a game, and they just haven't really had interest in doing that this year or the capability of doing it with Dylan Gabriel. But with Shedeur, I think they do. But if they lean into it, there's potential for it. If he really was into it, I would say it'd be more like 25% chance that he throws for 3 touchdowns. But there's still a chance despite the circumstances. And then we got Brosmer down here at 4K. We talked about it already, but I think he gives the Vikings a much better shot of having success. And he makes both Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison a lot more attractive this week just because they have been getting open. They can't throw the ball to themselves as well. Let's move on into my solid plays. Josh Allen, obviously in a playoff environment, can always go into Super Josh and score 47 points like he did last week. Was that last week or was that the week before? Let's look. Make sure I'm not full of it. Nope, it was the week before. They scored 47. Last week, he had 10 in a tough matchup against Houston. So, yeah, we could see Hero Josh for sure. I probably will just build naked Josh lineups. The key with Josh, actually, is if Kincaid plays, which he is trending towards playing. He didn't practice Wednesday, but he was limited both Thursday and Friday. He's like his most reliable target right now. He would be the one person that I'd be interested in stacking him with. Beyond that, I would just play him naked. All right, let's Matthew Stafford, we talked about. Great spot, great player, likely to score 3 touchdowns, but is that enough at 7K? I'm not sure of that. Mayfield, I'll play every week, but this isn't a week that I want to it's not a smash spot for me. Jacoby has been great, but the pricing now makes it a lot less attractive than where it was previously. I'll build a couple lineups, but probably no more than 3 with Brissett this week. Trevor Lawrence has actually scored some decent fantasy points, and he's getting some weapons back. He's got both Brendan Strange and Brian Thomas back now, so there's potential there. Again, probably 3 or 4 lineups there. I like him more than Brissett this week just because of where the pricing of the pieces that go along with him compared to Jacoby Brissett. And then CJ Stroud. Obviously, stacking him with Nico is easy, but Higgins has been solid. He seemed to have real good rapport with Davis Mills. We can mix him in a little bit there. Kirk was a lot more in play and did score last week against Buffalo. So maybe we need to be looking at Kirk a little bit more than I have been. At 3,400, that's probably a miss on. I need to probably get him more involved than what I have been so far. We'll definitely mix him into some of our stacks, but Schultz would be the other main guy. Last week only had 4 targets, but before that he was on a little heater there at 3,800. It doesn't take much to pay off his price. Even if we got 12 out of him, it would be okay if there's not a tight end that goes crazy. Tua, easy to stack. Probably build 3 or 4 lineups, basically just Tua, Achane, and Waddle. And we can build a couple single stacks in there, but really easy to stack. So we like building those two lineups when he goes off, he always brings those guys along with him. And Kirk, a little tough this week because he doesn't have London. We can mix in Mooney a little bit. And obviously we can stack him with Bijan as well because Bijan can catch touchdowns through the air as well. And then Geno, super cheap with the new offensive coordinator in a pretty good matchup. So we'll mix him in a little bit as well. Primarily with Bowers, Trey Tucker, and Tyler Lockett would be the main pieces that I would want to incorporate there. Not playing Daniel Jones or Brock Purdy this week. Bryce Young, I might build a couple of Bryce Young lineups, actually. He's been decent in games that they're chasing, and they're likely to be chasing in this game, but the Rams are a tough matchup. I have more interest in McMillan than I do Young, and that's primarily in garbage time points is kind of what I'm thinking there. So I'll get on McMillan a little bit. But beyond that, nobody else. I don't want to touch the Jets, so I'm not playing Tyrod. Go to running back, a little bit larger core player pool this week than what I would normally have. Bijan and Achane seem like the obvious plays at their price. And then Cook and Irving at their price, I think, are the next best plays there. I really like Kyron, but I think that there's a lack of touchdown equity, so that's why I don't have him in my core plays. I just have him in my solid plays. Jaylen Warren, really like a lot. I like this range quite a bit. Warren, Judkins, Hall. Field's going to be on Hall the most out of this group from what I've been seeing in the optimizers. But we also got Vidal and Neal here. So running back is going to be a little bit harder to figure out this week than most weeks. There's not just like a blatant spot where an offense is likely to score a lot of points and you have a lot of touchdown equity. To me, I would pretty much just play as I can fit it in my lineup. I will try to get two of these guys in it. I don't really have any big stands that I want to take here. The guys that I like the most would be Jaylen Warren and Bijan. And then probably I like Judkins in this range too. But like I said, I don't have a huge stand this week, so I'll just kind of be mixing and matching combinations of these guys with either 2 running backs or 3 running backs in some lineups as well. The big question with Bucky is like how much of a workload he's going to get. If we knew he was going to get 20 touches, then he would be probably like my biggest core play of the week. But I don't know that we're going to see that. We also don't know how he's going to respond to not playing in multiple weeks. Is he going to have some rust? It's hard to say when he's been out. I mean, I think it's been roughly 10 weeks since we've seen Bucky. So it's hard to say how he's going to come off that injury, but there is upside there. So I do want to lean into that variance a little bit and see if we can hit the upside in a few of our lineups. It's actually not a great matchup for the Jacksonville run game, but ETN seems to be the dude. I do want to mix in Tootin a little bit too at 4,500. I like Woody Marks. We talked about him probably getting more pass work. Ginty, it's not a good matchup, but he's just so explosive, and with a new play caller, they could get creative on how they use him, so I don't want to completely disregard him. You see that I'm not playing Taylor and McCaffrey. They're just too expensive, and the matchup is really, really bad for McCaffrey. I just don't see them paying off their price this week, so I'm not going to touch them. Rico, really tough matchup against the Rams. I'm not going to go there this week. Jones is someone that it could be a miss for sure. I like that game environment, but I think it's going to be more a chase mode for the Vikings, so that's why I don't have as much Jones this week. Let's jump over to wide receiver. Core plays, JSN is my big pay-up option. Devontae I prefer in that 7K range. Actually, I like Jefferson the most in that 7K range, but I'll get to Devontae a little bit just because he got so much touchdown equity. But when we look at it, it's hard to... He hasn't paid off his price that much. Like, he's getting 3X, but he's not getting 4X, as we see here. So it's hard for me to really see him be a tournament-winning play. So because of that, I'm actually going to move him over here. And Waddle, I mean, he is their offense, him and HN, so we know we're going to get solid volume there. Nico hasn't had that like massive boom game yet this year, but he is very capable of it. A few 25 spots, but we haven't seen that like 30 or 40 spot that he is capable of. This is a massive game. They're going to play a little bit more man. He's got the Sauce Gardner matchup that's elite on elite, and he's going to win a good chunk of those matchups. And against man coverage, if he wins, a few of those could be big plays. So I really like Nico this week. It's going to be very polarizing or a lot of variance there. It could be a really bad week or a really big week. It's really a matter of does he get a big play or two that gets him over that 100 yards and gets him a touchdown or two. Olave just seems like a really solid play with more touchdown equity than he normally has, just because I think they'll be able to move the ball better than they have been in recent weeks. Like McConkey, out of that receiving room, though, I actually like Johnston the best because I think they have similar likelihood of scoring 25 points, but QJ at 4,900 is just a lot more attractive. Mooney is decent. I like Addison and QJ a lot more in this range. I'll go ahead and move him over here, actually. Got to do some rearranging after the fact. But, yeah, I think these guys are just a lot more likely of scoring, of having that 30-point game, the 25-point game that we would love to get out of this range than Mooney is, especially with Kirk Cousins' arm strength at this point in his career. Yeah, like both those guys in that range. I'm actually going to move McConkey over too. Sorry for so many on-the-fly moments, but this helps me talk it out as I'm going through this on what I really want to do and really narrow it down. The wide receiver is the hardest one to narrow down. Obviously, when we're building our lineups, I like to build with the passing game with the quarterbacks a good chunk. Like that's going to dictate a lot of where my receiver pool is going to be. But we got to find who are those core guys that we're going to build without quarterbacks as well. And these spots down in this range, really Olave down, just feel like real solid plays to me to 4x to 5x their salary and be key components of our lineups across the board. Pierce had a down week last week, but he has been solid. He is the pass catcher out of the Colts that I have the most interest in this week. Yeah, I had 18-point, 20-point games before last week having a 3-point game, only 2 targets. Yeah, they just couldn't convert third downs last week, so their offense came off the field quite a bit against Kansas City. But we can see some of these target numbers. He's set a 13 targets and 10 target week, but been hovering around 5 to 7 pretty much every week. So at 4,800, I will take a guy that gets 5 to 7 targets with potential to get a big play and those big touchdowns. So Pierce at 4,800 is really good value. Trey Tucker at 4,800 with the regime change on the offense. He's been their like go-to guy as a receiver this year and has been pretty solid. He's had one real big boom game early in the year. He had the 43-point game. Hasn't done anything since, but really none of the Raiders have either. If anybody was going to do it out of that offense, he's likely to do it. But the more I talk about it, I'm not sure that Pierce. So we're going to move him out of there too. We're narrowing down our pool quite a bit as we talk through this, but that's a good thing. So we got DK next. He has been the go-to guy for Ward. And I think, like I said earlier, I think this is probably their best matchup of the year. Had 21 points last week. He also is probably the best return man in the league. He did have a return touchdown last week. So, yeah, he's solid, getting solid targets, 7, 3, 8. So at 4,400, like the spot quite a bit for him. And he's had weeks that he pays off that price a few different times. 20 spot from a guy at 4,400 does us just fine. Then we got Judy down here. I've talked a lot about how I really like Shedeur. Judy is a part of that. And I Mitchell, he's been signaling some good things, just hasn't come through yet, but he's a very explosive player. He's definitely a guy that can score 20 points in a week at 3,600. That is very attractive. And he's going to continue to get opportunities because they just have nobody else on that offense besides Mechie, who's also somewhat intriguing at 3,800 as well. And then we got Tipton for the Saints at 3K as a solid punt play. Over here, guys that I will mix in a little bit outside of my quarterback stacks, but Egbuka, Brian Thomas hasn't done anything this year, but it's hard for me to believe that a guy goes from 1,300 yards to just being a really bad player. I feel like the injuries had to have played into a little bit. Does feel like he was having some issues with dropping the ball, going across the middle, a little bit of the yips. We'll see if the time off and getting healthy has helped that. McMillan, I could see there getting there in garbage time. If Harrison plays, I'd probably move him up. Actually, all three of these guys, I could mix in a decent amount. I like Olave more, but if I can't get to 6,400 and I'm in this range and I need to fill in a guy, all these guys you could see hitting a ceiling this week, in multiple different game environments. We like the Chargers spot in general, but Keenan Allen would be the one that we would like the least out of that group, but still could hit. Tez, primarily just going to have him in Baker stacks, but at 4,200, like there's some lineups that you could work him into, but I do like Judy better this week. That is why I have Judy over here and Tez over here. Lockett was close to being one of my core plays, but I think Mitchell is more likely to have that really big game. You got Mechie and Tillman here that also have opportunities to do that. Puka, I just don't think I'll build some with Stafford, but it's hard for him to pay off his price and not bring Stafford along. And I think it's more likely he's somewhere in that 25-point range. And at 9K, that's just not going to win a tournament for us. All right, let's move out of tight end. Tight end's a little bit more straightforward. We got Brock Bowers at 5,800. He's my pay-up option. If Kincaid plays, I like him quite a bit there. And then we have Gadsden as well. We talked about the Chargers and why we like them. But I really like Strange and Fannin to be like solid volume plays at this price. It feels like a week to me, like tight end one could be around 15 points, and all of these guys are capable of that. And if that is the case, we got Fannin and Strange down here as really solid values and allows us to just get to a lot in our lineups. And we got Jawan Johnson at 4,200 we want to mix in as well. Like obviously McBride is a great player, but at 7,800 to 4X that, he needs a 30 spot, right? And I just think there's a lot better opportunity to 4X their salary here, and then we can go get other 4X opportunities at other positions. So I'm just going to be out on McBride except for my Brissett lineups because of where he's priced at. Kittle, he could burn us. Just a tough matchup against the Browns. So I'm going to go away from it this week. I just think Bowers is a better play. And then I think there's a good likelihood that one of these guys in the lower range is towards the top of that leaderboard and just opens a lot for us. So jump over at defense. Love the Browns again this week. Purdy just threw 3 interceptions last week. No reason to think that he might not do it again against a much worse matchup. And we got the Texans playing Daniel Jones in a big spot like that. And then the Titans playing Trevor Lawrence. They would be my go-to punt play. Primarily will be the Browns for me again this week, though. All right, let's build a lineup real quick. I haven't shut up about Shedeur, so I'm going to build a Shedeur lineup to get us going. And y'all can make fun of me next week when he misses, and he misses hard, but I'm rooting for the kid. I think he has the potential to actually be a long-time NFL starter. He's fun for the game, all the good things. But we will build this as Judy gets the big play. We'd also mix in Bond a little bit. He obviously had the big catch last week, had 2 targets, fellow rookie. Let's do that, actually. Let's go Bond here. Let's go Bond and Fannin. That is a stack that I do not think many people are going to have. So if it hits, we are giving ourselves a big opportunity to get leverage on the field. For this game, I'm actually going to go with the Texans here rather than the Browns. And then give me Bijan, Achane. Let's go back over here. Actually, let's go to JSN. Let's get JSN in here. Can we go another stud running back in our flex? Give me Jaylen Warren. Leaves us 3,900 at receiver. So we got a few different options there. But I'm going to go down actually to Mitchell. Leave a little bit on the table. So there's $1 million lineup. We are betting on the Browns. Oh, God. Nothing to be worried about there. No concerns. But we got Shedeur Sanders with a couple deep passes to Isaiah Bond, who breaks a 100-yard mark and gets in the end zone, pays off his price massively. Shedeur he could even throw for just 2 touchdowns, depending on how other quarterbacks on the slate do, and pay off his price. Like, if he gets to 16 points, we're in play. We'd like to see him more of that 20 range to really give us a shot at the Milly Maker. But he could do that with just 2 passing touchdowns as well. But Fannin, yeah, he's been in that 6 to 7 target range pretty much year round. And I think there's just more touchdown equity now with Shedeur in there. So I like that a lot for him paying off his price. Then we got 3 stud running backs in Bijan, Achane, and Jalen Warren, with the stud of all studs at receiver and JSN in a great matchup against Minnesota. And then our other flyer at 9 Mitchell finally breaking through. 7 targets and 6 targets since he's been there. Hasn't done anything with them, but this feels like a much better spot for him this week against Atlanta. So let's see what we can make happen. All right, my friends, thanks so much for tuning in. As always, if you're interested in getting the spreadsheets, you can just shoot me an email at millymakermaniac@gmail.com, and I will send those over to you. In coming weeks, I'll have it to where you guys can just become member of the Maniac clan, and you'll be able off of the website to download those sheets, but I'm still in process of learning a lot of the back end stuff on how to make that happen. So it's probably a few weeks away, but eventually we'll have the website that you guys can pull that off of. But for now, just shoot me an email and I will send you guys those spreadsheets if you want those. And then please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and like and comment. In the comments this week, please let me know who you think the slate breaker is, as well as once the slate happens, show me your winning lineups. I want to see winners that come out of the discussions that we've had every week. So please put those into the comments or shoot me an email with those lineups so I can brag about y'all winning big money. Hopefully this is the week that we finally get back on the winning track and we hit one of these big GPPs. All right, my friends, I appreciate you tuning in. Have a great weekend. Have fun on Sunday. Happy Thanksgiving, all the things. Good luck, my friends. We will see you on Monday for the recap.